Hi, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session we have with the New Hampshire Department of Education on Family Engagement Community of Practice. Today, Tyler and I are going to be talking about creating buy-in with family engagement. So quickly, our agenda, we're going to, like always, go through the WIDA ABCs and really make some foundation in that. We're going to look at the dual capacity building framework. Then we'll jump right into creating buy-in for family engagement. And if you are live with us today, we will have some discussion afterwards and be sharing ideas on how we can make this happen. So to start, let's ground ourselves really in the definition, right? We're all language teachers here. So I want to make sure we're clear on what we mean by buying into something. It's that informal meaning of we want everyone to accept this idea that it is right, and to influence people to believe that we need to have family engagement. And when we're talking about influencing people, that is both the teachers, educators, and the family side. So we're going to look at how to do that, really trying to help people understand that this is what we want to and need to move into. As we ground ourselves in the ideas that the WIDA ABCs of family engagement have, we're continuing to work on building trust. We're also focusing on communication. The second part of this, we're going to talk a lot about cross-cultural communication. And then this is also going to be connected to learning, right? When we talk about what parents want out of family engagement and also what teachers and educators want to share, we want this to be connected to learning in many ways. And just to recap briefly, we've seen this in our other sessions too, but the dual capacity building framework for family school partnership, making sure that we start with the idea of thinking both of what educators need and what families need, right? Remember, we have to think back to, does everybody have positive experiences with this? And if they don't, what are we going to do? Do people have training or background in what to do, especially thinking of teachers and how to do this and how to make families comfortable to join us in these things? So let's start with a little research, right? One of the best ways to get buy-in is to really look at the data and look at the facts. So a lot of family engagement research is done by Kathleen Hoover Dempsey, Joyce Epstein, and Karen Mapp. Karen Mapp actually created the dual capacity framework that we just looked at. So she has a lot of great information on that. But we know that effective family engagement improves student achievement, their behavior, attendance, the social emotional well-being, and it also decreases the dropout rate, which is a great concern among English language learners. And if you look to the right with this little dollar sign, if we want to create buy-in among administrators, we want to make sure that they know that engagement raises student academic achievement so much that schools would need to spend about $1,000 more per student to get the same effects, right? And the citation is down there. We'll also have it in the repository where you can get that data. But that's a big way to create some buy-in, is to let the schools, the administrators understand that this also is financially helpful to them. And then finally, I love this idea of it being the great equalizer, right? Research has shown that it doesn't matter the parent education levels, their literacy levels, their backgrounds. Family engagement creates these positive outcomes. So we might say yes, and, right? That research was all based on, I should say, monolingual learners. When we start thinking about including multilingual learner families, we want to say yes, and, right? And Tyler, I'm going to let you take this one because I know you did a lot of the work on this.
Yeah, so one of the things when we're thinking about engaging multilingual learner families is that partnership that we want to create with our families. It's very possible that a lot of our students and families coming from other countries are not accustomed to being so involved in their students' academic lives the way that we in this country expect for families to be involved. We as educators view our work as a partnership with families. And so when we're thinking about building this partnership with those families, we want to be sensitive to the fact that this is something that could be very new for them. This could be a huge difference culturally. So the way that we approach this, and this is kind of some of the things that we'll talk about during our presentation, but it's important that we're sensitive in the way that we're approaching it so that families understand that what we're trying to do is to help build that ownership within them of how they can help with their child's education, even if they do not speak the language, even if they don't have literacy levels, even if they didn't go to school themselves. It still can give them this opportunity to share in the development of their student in school. And as Mary mentioned, it's also that social emotional connection and that sense of community. And this is also a time that we can, through the engagement, help to tap into those funds of knowledge that our families bring with them, the opportunity for them to share some of their own expertise from their own culture. And with doing that, we're going to help create that inclusive community that is so essential for success for everyone.
Perfect. And we're not saying this is going to happen overnight, right? It takes a lot of work to get to this point. And so part of the three things I broke down here is to make this buy-inable, right? How do we get people to buy in, both schools and families? There's three things I was really looking at. You want to make it doable and not overwhelming. You want to make it enjoyable, and you want to make it worthwhile, right? For schools, so think of what are you already doing? And what are some additions or shifts that you might make to make it more welcoming for our multilingual learner families? And for families, to make it doable, we're going to have to reduce some of the obstacles, right? Like timing, location, childcare. What are things that are getting in the way? Which does mean we have to reach out to families and find out what some of those are. You also want to make it enjoyable. So this could be a mind shift for some, as opposed to an obligation. Have the sense of curiosity, right? How can we get to know our families? What do we want to know? And to make it enjoyable for our families, let's enlist them in deciding what types of activities they want. Make it something that they want to come through, that they're excited to bring their kids to as well. And we also want it to be worthwhile, right? So thinking tangibles, what do we want our families to leave with? What knowledge or what ideas? And how do we want them to feel when they're leaving? And then similarly, for the families, what do they want to share? What do they want us to know? So if we can think of these three things as we're working through planning our family engagement for our multilingual learner families, I think we're going to make some great progress. Now, a lot of our work on this piece in particular was based off of this toolkit. It's the toolkit of resources for engaging families and the community as partners in education. There's a citation here. We'll also, again, include this in the repository of resources, but we want to focus on two main parts. We've spoken a lot about the first part, about building an understanding of family and community engagement. So today we're going to focus on building that cultural bridge, right? So trying to get the buy-in by exploring culture and then building the trusting relationships. So to start, a cultural bridge. If we're building this cultural bridge, we have to know where we are building it from and where we are trying to connect it, right? So this image is showing us the one side of the bridge is the American culture, our school culture, and our individual culture. And we want to connect it to the ethnic culture, the family culture, and the individual culture of our families and parents within our school system. So to know where we're starting from, what is American culture? Sometimes it's really hard for us to see if we were born here. It's like that analogy or metaphor of a fish swimming in water, right? The water's just there. you don't understand it, you don't think about it, it just is. So sometimes for us as people who are born in this culture, if you were born here and grew up here, it takes a bit of time to peel back the layers and see what our culture is. And then every school has its own culture. And then individually, of course, we have to think about what are our beliefs? Are we becoming aware of our thoughts about our culture, about other cultures? And similarly, we want to start to understand our family and the ethnic cultures that they are coming from. So it does require a bit of research. Again, there's some ways to do that, some websites to go to, which are also included, but every school here is a bit different in who they are serving and what they want to know. So thinking about what do you need to be aware of both in our culture in the 3 layers and in our families' cultures is going to help. If you are new to thinking about the different parts of culture, this is a great image, the iceberg of it. If you've seen this many times before, you can fast forward through this. But if you haven't, take a minute to pause on this, because we're going to think about the surface layer is what we see for culture, right? It's often the things we see at family engagement events. But as you are really considering how to welcome and create a space that our families want to come to, we need to look both at the unspoken and the unconscious levels as well. So some things like concept of time, courtesy, personal space, as well as the nonverbal communication, right? Or patterns of decision making. What types of things are going to help parents want to be involved in choosing what we do for family engagement events? So I know Tyler and I are happy to explore a lot of this more in depth with anybody who wants to. But just really to put that out there is something to think about it if it's new for you. And then here's just a question. Is this obvious to everyone in your circles, or does some of this need to be said explicitly? Right? There's some bias that might appear. We want to make sure that we and everyone believes that families want to help their children succeed. Right? We need to ask how they want to be involved with that. If we don't have that beginning belief, we're not truly asking and listening for that. We need to provide opportunities for families to be seen as individuals, not just as a part of their major culture, but get to know them. And then we really want our family development and engagement to be connected to a school improvement plan. Sometimes it's just random. We need to do this, we need to do that. But how can we connect it to an improvement plan so that the educators, administrators buy in and see the purpose of this as well? And then just down here, but I have a quote from Young who talks about if families lack the knowledge and confidence to be within the school system, they're not going to participate as much. So it's our responsibility to be able to give them the knowledge of how to participate and to invite them into what we are doing by providing those opportunities.
Yes. And so the next part that we're going to talk about is the building trusting relationships with families and the community through effective communication. So as we kind of mentioned before, this two-way cultural communication can feel very foreign if it is not something that you as an educator or people in your building or district have done before. And something that Mary just said about tying the family engagement to a school improvement plan, it makes me think of the word intention and being very intentional about the way that you are approaching all of these things, but especially when we're talking about building trusting relationships, because as we know, trust is the foundation for everything. And if they're not feeling safe, and if they don't have that trust in you, and maybe they have the trust in you as the educator, but not particularly the school yet, then we've pulled back one layer, but still have more to go. So you can go to the next slide. Thinking about that cross-cultural communication within your school, this communication really is going to be important in minimizing that confusion and frustration that people can experience when they are entering that environment where not only are they not used to the language, but also may have different attitudes, values, and behaviors from other people, right? And as was mentioned earlier, thinking about what those things are for ourselves in our own culture and how those may be different. So that ties in with understanding that there are different ways of communicating that reflect one's culture. And think about the iceberg, right? There are a lot of different things that go into that. Acknowledging, respecting, and accommodating those cultural differences in the communication styles. We can think about things when we're working with students, for example. We know that sometimes making eye contact is considered disrespectful in other cultures, but we expect that with students. So even small things like that, understanding what those communication styles may be, that's really important because we can cause unnecessary stress and discomfort if we are not considering what those styles may be. And then additionally, it's also important that we are using strategies that we have available to us and that we can learn about to remove barriers that may result from these cultural differences. So one of those being the language, having some access to either translated materials or an individual that can help with the interpretation of that language, tapping into the resources that you have in order to help bridge that communication. So we're going to go specifically into thinking about what some of those strategies might look like in your classroom, in the classroom, not at the school level yet. We'll go into that in a second. So some suggestions might be inviting families to join those class trips, or going to a walking field trip, a student presentation, just coming to be part of the classroom. Again, we know that that trust is going to help build that buy-in. Additionally, we want to think about listening to the family's voices through the communication to kind of get their input, right? If they know that their opinion and their feelings are valued, that's another layer that we can think about with building that trust and strengthening the communication. And also thinking about communicating with them, whether it's at the beginning of the school year or when they first arrive into your classroom, to find out from them which communication methods work best for them. Because not all families are going to want to use their email. Not all families have access to internet necessarily. So it's important that we're asking what makes the most sense for them so we know that they're comfortable. Additionally, when we move over to thinking about the school cross-cultural communication, we want to think about how we can make these family engagement activities more accessible for them. Doing things like providing childcare in the school when those meetings are taking place. Again, surveying those families on, for example, when you're having a parent-teacher communication, parent-teacher, I'm losing the word here, Mary. Parent-teacher conferences, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Doing things that are making sure that families feel that they're going to be able to communicate. Having those flexible schedules are also really important for any formal and informal activities. And then the last slide here that we can think about when as educators, we know before we've mentioned that educators are not always prepared to be able to communicate with families, whether that's our native English speaking families or our multilingual families. Educators are just not provided that professional development and how to do that. So thinking about some of those strategies that were just mentioned, then again, really working on listening to that parent voice and hearing what they have to say. And we know as we read before, as Mary mentioned, as we've talked about in our other presentations, when you increase the capacity of an educator to engage parents, we know that there's going to be a comprehensive benefit. Everyone involved is going to benefit. There's going to be stronger relationships, and that's really going to help us with that buy-in in order for our educators who may not have felt comfortable previously engaging because they just didn't know the proper way to approach it, and also getting those families to feel more comfortable with being able to engage and be part of the school community.
Thanks, Tyler. So that was a quick look into what might be helping promote buy-in in the different ways. If you are watching this as a recording, please feel free go through the documents that we've uploaded to the repository. There's different activities in there that can be done with your school communities to help build buy-in. And if you are with us live, we are going to get into the conversation. Thanks so much, everyone.